Good evening. EU Special Representative for the South Caucasus, Tոյվո Կլաարի, will be giving an interview to public TV tonight. Mr. Clàr, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Clàr, the EU is increasingly becoming a geopolitical player, especially in the light of the war in Ukraine. How does the EU balance geopolitics with human rights and values?
Well, human rights and values are at the basis of our policies. Of course, the EU does have a interest in many parts of the world, but we are guided by our fundamental values.
Let's come back to the region. Baku ignores the European Union and the European Parliament statements, resolutions that demand to withdraw its armed forces from the territory of Armenia and to reopen the Lachin corridor. Why do you believe is that, Mr. Clàr?
First of all, I'd like to emphasize that we are very encouraged by the fact that we have this week the foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan meeting in Washington, and we have been very close contact with our American colleagues ahead of this meeting to ensure that our positions, our views are very much aligned, both in Washington and in Brussels. And in that sense, we share a common aspiration to move the peace process forward and to, in fact, achieve progress in all key areas, one of which is undoubtedly the delimitation of the borders and also distancing of forces. These are all part and parcel of the general of all the issues that are on the table, and again, we are very much supportive of the American approach, and we also expect to have on the European level new initiatives coming up in the very near future.
Mr. Clàr, we shall still talk about the peace treatment and the negotiations that are being held in Washington right now, as you quite rightly mentioned. But for now, please, why does Baku safely ignore EU resolutions? Why does Baku not take them seriously enough to act on them?
Well, first of all, I think again this is a conflict that has lasted for 30 years, more than 30 years. And there are very many facets to it. The important thing is that we are able to move forward on all aspects.
Sounds like a justification to me. Did I get you wrong?
No, I think you should understand this in a context of a process. And for us, the important thing is that we have Armenia and Azerbaijan at the table, that we are able to push forward on all aspects that need to be addressed, and that we get an outcome that actually, in the end, guarantees a safe and secure future for the South Caucasus, and that is, in that sense, the EU has very clearly set its positions on different issues. And I think it's important now to ensure that we have progress on various aspects in the negotiating process.
Mr. Clàr, we as the Armenian side are very appreciative of the EU's and Washington's facilitation efforts. However, if we come back to the situation on the ground, what we have is 5 months of blockade already, humanitarian crisis, shortage of food and medical supplies in Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as gas supply sporadic cut-offs. How far is the EU willing to go, in essence, for preventing a second genocide?
Well, first of all, I think we have to be very careful about using terminology. Secondly, the EU has been very clear in its statements, saying that the rights and security of the Armenians who are living in Karabakh has to be ensured. And that means that the people living there have to be able to live there in safety, in security, with their language, with their culture, with their religion, with everything that is essential protected. And of course, that includes also being able to live in a dignified manner. So this means that we need to we also have the ruling of the International Court of Justice. So it is important that this is followed up upon, and fundamentally the EU has very clearly expressed its position that the situation that we had before December, where people were able to move freely and transit was able to happen freely, that situation has to be restored.
The situation is not, and the people are not able to live in a dignified manner. And so what mechanisms do you believe will provide for it?
Well, that is exactly why we need to have these meetings that we are having right now in Washington. That is precisely why we from the EU side are looking to have further high-level meetings in the very near future, because we do need all of this resolved, including for the people of, for the Armenians of Karabakh to be able to live in safety and security. And in that sense, that is the only way we can push forward, is to ensure that we really have a strong process that delivers results. And that is what we are committed to. And I believe that is what also our American colleagues and friends are working on.
Is there a proposition of any international mechanisms that will ensure the rights and security of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh on the table?
There are numerous ideas and floating around. The important thing is what we are able to achieve in the process of negotiations, both in terms of negotiations between Yerevan and Baku, but also in terms of negotiations between Baku and Stepanakert. And these different tracks have to start delivering results. And that is again why we are very much pushing for an intensification of this process that unfortunately over the past many months has been somewhat stagnant, and that is not a good situation, and that is why we believe that we have to make every effort to have a much more intense round of meetings and discussions in order to deliver results.
Mr. Klar, if the situation does not change, despite all the efforts that Washington and Brussels are making, will there be consequences for the side that does not comply?
Well, first of all, I do believe that we are all working for results, and we are all working for a positive outcome that will deliver good results for everybody. So
why then
I would say
Lachin corridor is still blockaded, and moreover, there's a checkpoint installed?
Well, again, that is why we are really in need of stepping up the process, because there is an urgent need for a comprehensive solution, for comprehensive settlement. And that is what we as the EU are committed to, and what our member states are committed to. So I don't want to start speculating about bad outcomes. I want to rather focus on what we want to achieve and what we believe is achievable, which is a comprehensive settlement that will encompass both a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan, delimitation of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, opening of communications, and assurances for the rights and security of Karabakh Armenians.
Since you mentioned the limitation and demarcation, the peace treaty negotiations in Washington are in process, and yes, let's hope that they will yield some positive fruits. However, in public statements at least, Baku demands villages from Armenia as well as an extraterritorial corridor. What's the EU's stance on demands that go against the territorial integrity of Armenia?
Well, first of all, I think regarding these specific villages that you are mentioning, I think there are also different understandings also in Armenia regarding what their status is. Inevitably, in the process of delimitation, these kinds of issues need to be addressed. But as far as the question of transit routes, and specifically what you're mentioning, the transit connection between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan, that of course such a route or such a railway of course has to be if it's on Armenian territory, it's operating under Armenian laws and regulations. So that is the natural thing that has to be the case. I personally am quite confident that it is, or it should be, fairly easy to be able to move forward on the question of agreeing on transit connections between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan via Armenia. I think that there's a win-win situation. There's a win-win outcome in that for everyone concerned, and I am hopeful that we should be able to, with some goodwill on all sides, to actually achieve real progress on that area, because it is in the interest of Azerbaijan, but I believe also it's in the interest of Armenia if we can then have a railway that comes from Azerbaijan via Armenia to Nakhichevan, and from Nakhichevan again continues on to Gyumri and eventually to Kars.
If it is under the control of Armenia.
Of course, that's what it should be. That is what the natural outcome should be. But I mean, this kind of transit arrangement is in the interest of Azerbaijan. It's in the interest of Armenia as well.
Mr. Kla, we've seen Baku not comply with the November 9 statement, ignore the Hague court verdict on unblocking the corridor, leave alone resolutions and statements. With this track record, what will guarantee that even if Baku signs the peace treaty, they will also go with it and comply with it?
Agreements are there to be fulfilled. So that is what the natural assumption is. As far as anybody, any of the parties is concerned that signs an agreement. So that is what we would naturally expect. I will just stop there.
But we cannot assume that, since, as I enumerated, Baku doesn't have a track record of keeping promises. And so what mechanisms will guarantee that once, hopefully, a peace treaty is signed, the sides will also comply with it? Well, again, our assumption is that any treaty, any agreement that is signed will be implemented. And if it's not? Let's assume it is. Mr. Kla, what stage are the EU-Armenia relations at, in your estimation? I sense that the Armenia-EU relations have actually gone through a great, well, revival is maybe not the right word because they were good already, but they have certainly been boosted over the last years. And that is positive. That is, I believe, positive for Armenia, but it is certainly also positive for the EU. And that is also why, the simple answer why the EU is so interested in actually having a comprehensive settlement of the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, because in the end, a peaceful South Caucasus, where borders are open, where people are able to move freely, where goods are able to move freely, that will be a more prosperous South Caucasus,
and it will certainly also be a better partner for us as a whole, for the European Union, and also as a transit corridor between East and West. So for us as EU, we do have a fundamental interest in helping Armenia and Azerbaijan, and helping Armenians and Azerbaijanis overcome this conflict. It's not just an abstract desire to sort of do good, but actually we have a genuine fundamental interest in a more prosperous Armenia, in a more prosperous South Caucasus, and that is why we're working very hard on our relationship with Armenia in particular, but with the South Caucasus countries in general.
Well, Russia says you simply want them out of the region and not peace into the region. Well, how would you comment?
I cannot be responsible for the words uttered by representatives in Moscow, but certainly that is not the motivating factor for the European Union. For us, it is that this is our neighborhood, and we want peace and prosperity in our neighborhood. It's as simple as that. And as it happens, both Yerevan and also Baku have expressed an interest in the EU being engaged and being more engaged. So we are not acting against anybody. We are acting for the countries of the region.
Is the dynamics and rhythm of the relations between EU and Armenia satisfactory, Mr. Klar? And well, what can Armenia do to become an even more valuable partner for the EU?
I think it is, but I think we can always do more. And in that sense, I think the most important thing is to look at ways of increasing our political relationship, but also our commercial relationship, to find even more common ground and to work together in as many areas as we possibly can. And so in that sense, as I say, I think the relationship is very good, but I do believe that on both sides there certainly is room for even more, and I think it is worthwhile working on it.
Mr. Klar, let's close the program with a message from you to the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh who have shown so much patience and resilience in the face of danger they've been facing for 5 months now.
The European Union, as I already stated, is fundamentally committed to the principle that the rights and security of the Armenians in Karabakh form an integral part of a settlement of the overall conflict. We are working with that as a basis. We are in dialogue with all parties on that basis, and for us, this is the outcome that is important, that is essential, and that we will keep in our sights.
Thank you one more time for this opportunity and your time.
Thank you.
EU Special Representative for the South Caucasus, Tոյվո Կլաարի, sat down with the public TV tonight.